Hello and welcome to the Extended Greg YouTube channel. I'm Greg, and today we're going to be doing part 2 of, or continuing on with our development of our Docker container to do an HLS stream out to the world. So pretty much it's a audio stream that is taken from an IceCast server, transcoded, and then committed through NGINX in order to be able to become an HLS stream. So we're going to keep going with this, see if we can progress the project a little bit further. So let's get right into it. So here's where we left off yesterday. We got pretty much our encoder working, as well as having at least our baseline install of the existing RTMP HLS server. And that we just downloaded directly, but I want to do some modifications to it. So first thing, let's actually try and see what we could do about extending this particular package to be able to make something custom that we can have do some more functionality besides just the base. And I'll start it back up. Let's just take a look at where we got to. So we'll start this first. And then we'll start the other one. I do have it open from yesterday. And let's just refresh. And that's pretty much where we got. So we're generating the bars, everything else, you know, the music, but it's just gonna loop. It's not doing any real work at this point. But this is also the baseline player. There is a secondary player that we can actually take a look at. So if we scroll down here with to view the stream, there's HLS, and then there's HLS_HLSJS, which is the second variation of the HLS player. So let's take a look at that too. And that one, you actually have a nice little loading bar, so you see as it loads the new chunks. And it's doing 3-second chunks, things like that, but in effect, you see how much is available. And I'm not sure if we can actually go back to where we connected, but it's definitely a different experience. The thing I'm curious about is if this is actually caching the particular media as it's loading. And since this is a live stream, we don't necessarily want this behavior. But let's open up Task Manager really quick. And let's look at the actual memory usage and see if it's going up. Right, and we see it going up, we see it going down. So it is entirely possible that it won't be an issue. And it's also possible that once it gets to all 20 segments, that it will actually drop this number down. Because if we click here, yeah, it doesn't let us go back. So that's perfectly fine. So we might try and use this. But let's actually take a look. I'm going to just stop this playing for a second, and let's go take a look at the actual source code for this. So if we go to our GitHub for this, if we go to players, we can see the HLS.html and the HLS.html. And it looks like there's other variations as well. But I'm really interested in the HLS just because I know it has broader compatibility and is gaining support amongst browsers natively. So hopefully at some point they do add this as part of the HTML5 standard or whatever the future iterations of that is. But I think it's something where we can potentially build upon this. And it doesn't appear to be particularly long, but it has some very long lines in it. mainly to do with Bootstrap. So those are pretty standard CDN-based style sheets and things like that to overall style the page. And that's actually something I want to use anyway, so it does help out in this particular scenario. The video tag is HTML5. And this is where the text does not help. But it does look like the video.js entry and then an included CDN of HLS.js appears to turn that into an HLS player. So, which is perfectly fine with me. So the less that we have to do on our end, the better. But I definitely want to add some dynamic elements. This is a little bit of HTML, things like that. But it's a good opportunity to be able to kind of extend that particular Docker with our own custom iteration. So we're going to do another Docker file, hopefully with better luck than yesterday, but this time we're writing it from scratch, so I think it'll be a little bit better. And then we're going to do from, let's see what version we actually want. I do think it's the same one we're running, but let's see what we got. And we do want latest Alpine. Let's copy the whole thing. And we see it's only 37.45 megabytes, while the standard ones, based on, it looks like, well, actually, I don't know what it's based on, but they're about double the size. And NVENC is out of this world because it has to have the entire NVIDIA driver in there. So let's go back over here. Right, so we're starting here. Let's create a folder for this so we can actually save it. So HLS server. We will save the Docker file. I'm actually going to shut down these VMs just because it's making a lot of noise. Or not the VMs, the Dockers. Should hopefully keep my computer from getting too unhappy. I am running this on a laptop, by the way, because that is the computer I use for sharing. The streaming computer I have is a desktop, but it's difficult to try and manage those shares just because of the way I have my screen set up. All right, so we're going to put this in quotes. We're just going to do Dockerfile with a capital D. And we will save that out. So what we can add to that is we can actually download some of the files that we want to modify. So back over in the Docker itself, we have the download button right here. We have the download button right here. And this will actually let us put potentially a splash page, an index page that otherwise was that default page that we saw yesterday. So let's navigate to where we have this, which HLS server. And let's just call it player.html. So right now, it doesn't have things like PHP installed. And that is something we want to add. So something else we're going to need is also the config file. So like right here, we have conf directory. And we want NGINX.conf, and we're going to download that as well. And pretty much that's all we're going to need for now. Because we do have a couple of other things available. If we wanted to rebuild their Docker file, we could do that. But in this case, since we're just extending it, it's actually going to have everything that this particular Docker file has. But it definitely, and it is going to be version, well, this is not the Alpine version, but the Alpine version is 3.11, which is quite a bit older. So we may need to use an older version of PHP. And I'm not sure what the reason is behind using that particular thing, but in this particular case, I'm not too worried about it. So we're going to put in a run command because we definitely know we want some additional things. And let me turn back on the music while we're doing this. So we're going to do run, and we're going to do apk -- no cache, add, and we're going to try and do PHP. And I'm trying to think if I could check out, yeah. Let's go to the actual repositories for... And here's something interesting about this. So if you actually take these, so the stuff that's usually in the APK repositories file, you can actually go through, just enter them as a URL, and you'll be able to search them appropriately. So in this case, we're x86-64, and we want to see what packages are available. Here's a particular list. So we could do find PHP, and that's all there is in the main. So let's go to community. And there we see all of the PHP packages. And we see PHP 7 is our only option. So I think we can work with that. So let's do PHP 7, and we shouldn't have to put anything else. It should automatically link to this particular thing right here. There is also a NGINX, I believe, installer as well, but we may need to manually specify that. I'll check that out in a second. And what PHP is going to allow us to do is actually put in dynamic variables into the web page. So just like we would build a shell script, something like that, PHP will let us do that for any of the web pages that we serve. So let's... There's 106 of them. Let's do NGINX. And by the way, the cert bot is actually really, really good for using the Let's Encrypt SSL files. And I will probably be putting that in for production just to take care of all of that as well. But in this, because we're running it locally, it won't actually be able to authenticate. It has to be on a public-facing server so it can authenticate and validate that it is who you are who you say you are automatically. But specifically, I actually made a list. And here we could try the overhead cam. I replaced the overhead cam here to try and make it... which are we? Nope. To try and make it less... Oh, I tightened it too much. Well, whatever. It's a manual camera, so that way the focus doesn't keep jogging in and out and all of that. And actually, just as a general rule, the tighter you close the iris, it is set to auto exposure, obviously, but the tighter you close the iris, the more depth of field that you have. So realistically, everything should be in focus. So, but we're going to have a dynamic player. We're going to integrate SSL. We're going to put in a mechanism to be able to put in a logo. I want to put in some mechanism for audio only. So if we want to disable the video entirely, I want to make that a switch. So if we just want to embed a video or just a logo on the video, we could do that when we send it. But if we didn't want to do that, we could just pretty much mute the video portion of it and just have the audio play. And that may or may not be an option. Then some bitrate settings, and then mono to stereo audio, just because I know there's some mono feeds in play for this. So back over here, and again, I apologize if this was too small. So that's the cert bot I was talking about. So we'll leave it as PHP 7 for now. And actually, let's see if we could pull up just a quick reference guide. Right, so it says install PHP 7. This is from Nixcraft, and I do think they're generally very reliable in terms of their procedures, everything else like that. So, and it says PHP 7 FPM and OP cache. So let's actually put all of those. Assuming I can copy it correctly. There we go. Right, next. Once we get it installed, we'll do -- version, etc. Now, all of this right here, I don't know that we need any of this. GD is for images. MySQLi is if we actually want to integrate with the database. zlib, curl, all of that. We actually don't need any of those packages. Gives you a full list of packages available. That's fine. How to find more. We're running it command line, so we don't have to worry about that, but we do need to start PHP 7. So we are going to have to start that manually. And here it shows us the specific NGINX config that we have to add. So we will have to add this to our file. So let's go ahead and open that up. I have to zoom out just a little bit because otherwise it's just way too difficult to try and read this as it's when it's so far away. Right, so we have the RTMP here. HTTP down here. And I believe we could still just put it in at the top. Let's try it. And just because I like all my spacing to be matched, we're going to go like this. So port 5000, the index is going to be index.php. We could also add HTML to this as well and just make HTML by default. So we could do index.html, and that would be perfectly fine. But in this particular case, we're just going to leave it at the defaults. Here it talks about the SSL config as well. And that's probably going to be something we're going to do in a second, so we don't have to look up that either. But we will need to make sure that we start PHP FPM 7. So once we install all of those, we're going to copy our files. So first one's going to be nginx.conf. And yes, we could put these in as runtime, but we want the default to be in kind of that working state. So technically we wouldn't necessarily need to actually do anything. And part of it is when we actually do the PHP files, for example, we will make it so it'll dynamically choose the stream based on what we're actually putting in for the URL, or putting in as a argument. So nginx.conf, in the local directory, we want to put that, helps if I put a slash. Where did we get this from? /conf. Well, we got to look at the actual file here and see where it copies it in. Right, so it adds all of these, CA certificates, OpenSSL, etc., etc. And just overwrites nginx.conf. So we're actually going to go ahead and overwrite it again. Then we're also going to copy in our player. And actually, let's rename it PHP, because we know we're going to actually put some PHP code in there. And we're just going to drop that in the location where the other players are, just for right now. And if we put it in the root of the HTML directory, it would actually be our splash page, so maybe we do that. Let's call it index.php. And something else I want to do is remove the existing index. Otherwise, they'll conflict and it will choose whatever is first in the list. Right, so we're not ready to run it yet, but we do at least have an understanding of what we're actually putting in here. So next thing we want to do, let's actually just start defining our entry point, because we know we have to start PHP FPM 7. And actually, let's, assuming I can type, let's go back over here. Let's look how it actually runs. So it runs it by doing nginx-g daemon off. So let's just copy that, because we're going to be overriding that. But we're going to be adding something to the beginning of it. And I gotta think of how we do that without... Okay, let's try this. Alright, so the ampersand means that it will run it in the background, but still keep all of the output from it coming to the local console. And they will exit together. If we did no hup, for example, we could actually make it, based on what flags we enter, to completely disconnected from the console. So it's running as a service in effect. But in this particular case, we want to see the output as we're running, along with NGINX and everything else. So it should treat these as two separate lines. And let's actually go ahead and just try it. We don't have a lot going on here. We do need to rename our player file. So now we have the index.php. And something we need to find is where we're actually defining. Here it is. So it's the test.m3u8. So that's the source that we're currently loading. This is where we initialize the HLS, everything else like that. So this is what we're eventually going to be changing to a dynamic variable. But for right now, let's just keep it as it is. Let's see if we can get it to build. I'll put it that way. All right. Now let's try this. And let's call it new HLS NGINX. Where's the X? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't put the dot. All right, so let's see. Was there an issue? It says HTTP2 server error reading preface from client and saying pipe from the Docker engine. Let's just try and run it. And let's actually use the Docker UI to be able to do that. So if we go to images, we see new HLS NGINX right here. We see it's 114 megabytes, whereas the original one in total was 102 for all of the images that were in use. So what he added on may have been 36 megabytes, but the total, including all of the images that it relies upon, are 102. So we didn't add that much more, about, I would say 12 megabytes. So let's go ahead and run it. Location directive is not allowed here on line 8. So we may need to actually put that in server. So there's an error with our comp file. So specifically this. So let's put it under HTTP. Server, here's our locations, dash. Let's tack it onto the end. Now it should be in the right place. Let's stop it, rebuild it. So I'm going to trash our new, just so that way we can go ahead and rebuild that. We don't necessarily have to delete it as long as we define the same name. And we are, so. Okay. And we see no errors that time at all, so that's very encouraging. Let's go ahead and start it. Just for optional settings, we do need to actually set this, otherwise it will potentially not observe it. Actually, I want to see what it does really quick. I haven't actually tried that. It's also identifying some vulnerabilities that we would have to pretty much be worried about. I'm not sure that it's in our file. It's in an upstream file, it looks like. Also, yeah, 3.11 is no longer supported. I was just thinking of something. I could make my neck hurt a lot less and also be able to see this better if I put VLC, or VNC, excuse me, on the computer that I'm using to control this. I'm very tempted to just do that really quick. So just for reference purposes, so where I have to put the screen, so it doesn't block the light, it does put the lights like right into my eyes as I'm looking at it. So it's actually not very easy to try and read it, as well as, not to mention it's a pretty small screen because I got cameras all over the place. So just a little, at some point I'm going to do like a studio tour, I'm pretty sure. But, and by studio, I mean my office that I have turned into a studio. But, you know, it's just one of those things. Let's try it. I'm gonna digress for a second. Bear with me. Let's get, which VLC variant should we use? I usually use Ultra VNC, but, excuse me, yeah, not VLC, but VNC. I usually use Ultra VNC, but I have been liking Real VNC, but I think it does require a subscription. Let's see. I know they try to. Let's try it. We're doing it live. Let's see. Oh. No, it does look like it requires a paid service, so. Ultra VNC is completely free. It can still be controlled by Real VNC Viewer, but definitely one of those things. And the reason I have to uninstall it is because I'm going to put another one in. Did I click? There it is. Oh. The only thing with VLC, Ultra VNC, is that you actually have to keep an eye on it. The installers tend to have some bloatware on them that you need to watch out for. All right. So that's going. What am I agreeing to? It doesn't have anything. Now, the reason I'm using VNC instead of using something else like a remote desktop is that because remote desktop will actually make it so I can't share the screen. I'm using one of the physical outputs from the actual machine in order to be able to do it. So definitely not something that would be ideal, where VNC will allow me to just control the screen. And let me just verify what the IP address is. $147. Let's try it. I did not set a password. So right here, in order to actually set a password, we would go to Properties. I'm going to set a very secure password here. And then we can hit OK. Oh, I did the wrong password. So it actually has you only enter it once. There we go. Now it should pop up, say confirm. And now I should be able to control it. There we go. The luxury. All right, I'm going to move this other keyboard out of the way, because now I can use my regular keyboard and mouse, which will be a dream by comparison. Okay. So, we're in the middle of doing things. So we just moved this over here. We just built it. We want to rerun this. So let's go over here. We can rerun our Docker container that we just built. We're going to leave... We're actually going to enter these ports. So we're going to do 1935 and 8080. Just so that way we can look and inspect it. Right, currently there are no logs displaying. But that's okay. Let's go back over here. We'll go over to our HLS player. Let's just see if it still shows. So right now it has no source attached to it, so we can go back into Docker. We do see our connection here. So that's totally fine. But let's start a source. It says unconnected output. Let's go back over to containers. Might have double created it. Right, so this one right here, we're just leaving off, because that's the default one. This is the one that we're currently using, that's using those ports right now. We have this, which is... looks like it's also running. Let's stop these. So it does look like our current one is this one. We have RTMP source and RTMP source latest. So this is the one that we just launched. We can launch it again. It did automatically exit. And it looks like it's not connecting, so I'm just going to restart this. Just because there are 2 instances running. And now it was able to connect. So now if we go back to our instance, we hit F5, we do see it is in fact going. And if I unmute this, so we do see that that's currently working. So let's go ahead and actually go through and try and just do index. So I'm going to delete this right here. And I'm going to do index.php. So it doesn't look like it actually updated that. But let's see if it actually made it in. It says bad gateway, which means that the FPM is not running. So, which is fine. We'll have to get that worked out. So let's do a quick investigation on some PHP 7 containers that do have it available. So if we go back to Docker Hub, and we search for PHP 7, we do see this here, so let's try it. And actually, we may need to put NGINX in there as well. And it does have Alpine. And let's just see what it has. So pretty much what we're seeing here is what it's using in order to actually get everything in. It does look like it's building it all from source. And right now it just loads NGINX, so that's not going to help us. Let's try doing PHP as our search variable again. And what it looks like is in order to get PHP, we would have to go up quite a few levels. And that's not necessarily appetizing, just because we would have to go... actually, I'm not sure how far we would have to go back. So this is based on... let's actually look. We could see it here. So this is based on Alpine directly. So maybe we can actually get a PHP version based on Alpine that we can then have this build upon. But we will have to obviously rebuild this entire thing. So let's download this entire file. Actually, we'd have to copy this entire repository. Alright, so let's do that. Which is really annoying. So we're going to download the zip file version of this. Let's actually put it on the desktop. Just going to put it in here. And this will save us actually having to go in and put in our own version of it. But it does mean that we're now responsible for maintaining it, maintaining our own version of it. We're obviously not maintaining it for everybody. So let me stop all these containers just really quick before my computer flies away. I'm going to delete this because we're going to build it under the same name. We'll go into our folder. I'm going to unzip this. Okay, which makes life a little easy. So this is the folder right here. This is the Docker file for Alpine, and that's the one that we're going to build. And I'm just going to rename this just so that way we're not building all of them. Especially the NVANC, just because that one I think is just going to be a little too much and we can't capitalize on that right now. And we're just going to change Dockerfile Alpine to just be Dockerfile. So let's see. So this is what we were working on before. We were trying to get that to go through. We do have these copies here, but we're just going to let that cook for a second. And I'm closing that out just so I don't get confused for which is which. We're going to go over here where it says Alpine version 3.11. We are going to change this line right here. And this is pretty much where we're going to use PHP as our base. It does have NGINX version here as well, so let's see if we can find that. And we may need to comment some more out. And let's see. And let's just do a NGINX PHP. So it starts with NGINX, Alpine Slim, and then it adds this code on top of it. All right. So, with that being said, we may be able to find the exact version that we want to use, which in this particular case, going back to here, we want NGINX version 1.17.5. So let's try and find that. And I do believe it does need to say PHP, otherwise it won't explicitly support PHP. Well, it may. We didn't actually check it. let's see. They only have one branch. Let's see. Stale. Yeah, there's just not that many. Because what I would really like is just to be able to take that and have that overlay over top. All right, let's try going back. PHP is another option, but usually it is CLI. Core extensions, PCL, PECL. So it does have Apache. It doesn't look like it has NGINX, or does it? So I do believe the rest of these are all by default. Let's see. This looks promising. So how did they get it? So this is 3.12, which is not far off from where we want to be. And this is not doing the build of NGINX from source. But it is adding the new comp file. And it may also tell us how to specifically get it to launch. Right, because this is also using FPM as well. Okay, so it's using Supervisor D to actually do the start. So it's adding this right here. So we may actually be able to emulate that. Right, so we have our NGINX build right here. RTMP module. Okay. Forwarding of logs, everything. So this is after the build. So this is where we would want to put it. So we're doing the installation right here, run. Let's actually just do a direct copy if we can do that. So APK no cache, we're going to add all of this. Whether we need it or not is not relevant. We're just going to add all of it. And this may not be it. Let's actually check. I want to make sure. We are on Alpine. There is a new config. Right, because we're deleting this, but then we're adding it later, looks like. So we need to download the, let's do the php.ini. We're going to do the fpm pool. And download them both, maybe the NGINX as well. And supervisor D. So let's just go through these one at a time. So we're just going to put them in here. Just going to put in a folder called PHP just because I'm worried about conflicts. Right, and this has our time zone, which actually I may want to change. We're going to compare this, but we're just going to modify our existing NGINX file in order to be able to support this appropriately. So conf PHP, and we just pretty much leave the destinations the same. And we're still using this NGINX file, but we will need to open up the other one to verify it. Let's keep going back over here. We have supervisor D, which needs to be added. Same deal with this, so we're going to do conf/php. And again, this is from Aor or Orotech from his GitHub, and it's pretty close to what we wanted. If it did 3.11 and it did the right version of NGINX, we would have actually just used it directly. All right, all of this to do with NGINX, we're going to actually leave alone because we're still using it as is. Working directory, that's all fine. So we do want this, and we will have to do we will have to add this in. And technically, it's going to run our NGINX for us anyway. So we'll see what we could do there. So let's save that. Let's open up our comp files that we just downloaded. So I do want to take a look at supervisor D. So this is the PHP FPM7, so -f. So we see the command is exactly the same here, which is the -g daemon off. So that does match exactly what we have down here. So this is not an issue. This is going to get started automatically. So we'll delete that. Let me go back into here. All of this looks good. So we're going to leave it as is and just close it out. Then we're going to come over here, back to PHP. Let's look at our NGINX file and do a contrast and compare versus our production NGINX file, which is that other one. Because specifically, we want the PHP code to come in and be able to parse PHP directly. So it's doing all of this for temp files, things of that nature. We may need to do that. So let's look for our server instance inside of this, which should be this. So we have our server instance here. We have all our listeners, server name, etc. We have our root. Let's check for our index specification so we can add PHP to that. Okay. It does not have it. So we can define it. It's the wrong file. Right, so we put our index right there. So this has a location for slash, which is the root of the directory. And I'm trying to see if we have that already defined. And I don't believe we do. So let's actually copy that over as well. Alright, so this is the 500 error pages, things of that nature, past PHP scripts to PHP FPM listening on local. So this is going to replace our other code that we have in here that we added from the previous example. Then we're going to go back over here. The JPEG files, things like that. It's setting a 5-day expiration. We're not too worried about that. We do want to disable access to dot files. We do want to allow this. And then this is gzip. Things like that. Let's just add it all, to be honest, because I don't believe it conflicts directly. I'm not seeing anything that's jumping out at me. And that's outside of server, but inside of HTTP. So this bracket right here needs to go away. Right, and let's just double check at the top here. Because here we have our server definition. We can include this as well. Because that will actually handle uploads and things like that. Whether we use them or not is another story. We want to make this as versatile as possible, so that way we're not actually going through and trying to modify it later. It's just already set to go. And really, that should be close. All right, so that's our nginx.conf file. Let's go back to Dockerfile. And that gets copied over right here. So we're good with that. Let's keep looking. It wants to switch to a non-root user, which is perfectly fine. And it's also doing the source directory into HTML. I do want to just look and see what's inside of it, though. Because we have the test.html. And then it has index.php, which is just PHP info. And what it's doing is hopefully enough. We're going to find out. So, going from here, let's just try and build it and run it and just see what happens. We may need to add these 3 lines here. We're going to find out. All right, we're keeping this. Everything's off. Images, I do want to delete and do some cleanup really quick. All right, and then let's go back to containers. It's getting really long, but we are here, so let's see what we got. Okay, so we're just going to call it the same exact thing. Let's try building it. Failed to solve, no build stage in current context. So pretty much line 15 is where it ran into issues. So install dependencies. Let's take a look at what that was. Because this thing is gigantic. So it had a double character there, which is a hidden character. By the way, I did set all this up so it starts by default as Unix files instead of trying to have to convert it after the fact. Let's just try and run this again. Same deal. Let's see. Load build definition from Dockerfile, transferring Dockerfile. And it may be because of the way that it copied, which means there's probably going to be a bunch of that. So what we could do is inside of this, we're going to show line endings. Right, so we have line feeds. So we see nothing out of the ordinary there. Now we can go, we'll show white space and tab characters. So we see tabs defined here, we see spaces defined elsewhere, we see combinations. White space should not be affecting a Docker file, so I do not believe that that's part of it. So So now we're just showing everything. Let's look back at that error. By the way, this is 90% of this kind of thing is just trying to figure out what it's telling you. It said, failed to solve, no build stage in current context. Which means it's missing something. Did I comment something out? Yes. That's me. Right, we see it running. It's doing its thing. It's going to take a second because it does actually have to compile all of this. Once it compiles it, as long as we don't make changes to those lines that are actually building it, we will be able to reuse those with subsequent changes, which is part of the reason why we added a lot of the stuff to the end. So, hopefully, everything stays copacetic, but just going to minimize some things here just to make sure everything's displaying correctly. I'll try and slide back out of the way a little bit. We see the number of seconds elapsed for each step. So this is actually a really big build in terms of what it's actually trying to accomplish. So, and this may take a second, but it's on a pretty quick machine. So if we actually, I'm going to pull up the other keyboard again just so I could do Control-Shift-Escape, and this is part of the reason why we don't have the other Dockers running at this point, is we really see the amount of processing that it's doing in order to be able to build this effectively. This is a laptop once again, so it is something where doesn't necessarily have a lot of horsepower, but I mean, to be honest with you, it's a 12th gen i5 with quite a few efficiency cores. I think at least 6 performance cores, and it pinned all of them. So, overall, I think that that went pretty quickly. So now that that's actually there, let's go ahead and run it and see what we get. If it runs. No guarantees here. Right now we see we're up to 217 because we installed all of those additional packages. Right, we need to make sure that we forward our ports here. So 1935, I need to use the correct keyboard. We're going to leave everything else the same. Let's name it. Let's hit run. Excellent. So what it said here, NGINX with PID 8, FPM, PID 9. User has not been defined. User has not been defined. Failed to post-process the configuration twice. FPM initialization failed. FPM initialization failed. And then it said entering running state, but FPM exited not expected. So we will probably need those additional three lines. And if we look back at our list of containers here, it is not running. So let's go ahead and resolve that. I'm just going to delete it once again. Says it's in use, I'm just going to, let's move ahead. So let me turn back off our line character symbol stuff. Scroll down to the bottom. We'll go over to GitHub, and we're going to add the user nobody. And let's do this right here. We're not going to copy in the source files because it is actually copying that in. This is the wrong Docker file, is it? It is not. All right. And let's go ahead and try building it once more. And we see how much faster that went because it already pre-built the other image portions. So now let's go ahead and run it. So it says it's a dangling image right here because we just rebuilt a new one. So we're going to go ahead and get rid of that. Let's see. We do need to get rid of this. Oh, it says it's still running. Boom, boom, boom. Let's go back over to images. We should be able to delete the dangling image. And now we should be able to start this. The other keyboard that I have, by the way, is a slightly different layout than my usual keyboard, which is why I'm always mistyping stuff, so you have no idea how happy this makes me that this is working. And I have no idea why I didn't do it earlier. Alright. So, we see that the performance was a bit different. We did have mount HLS failed, permission denied, but NGINX exited. So PHP FPM entered running state successfully, but NGINX exited because it didn't have access. So we do need to reassign the permissions to mount HLS. So let's go ahead and look at that in our Docker file. See. So this is actually where we're building the final image. So we would look for everything here because even if it's copying it over, we would just have to reallocate that. And I'm keeping the other one running in the Docker just so I can make sure of the path. So the /mount /HLS is what we actually want to correct, because that is runtime. So. And that would also be defined in our nginx.conf file. So right here we have mount as our root. Same thing here for HLS. So let's actually just make it so we have that. We're changing our permissions on that folder on the mount folder in particular to nobody. And that should at least match between the two. Because right here we switch our user to nobody. So before we switch that, we do want that to recurse, even though I think it's an empty directory. Just mount. Let's save that out. Let's rerun. First, before we do that, we need to stop this in order to be able to rebuild it, not have it turn into crazy stuff. So it's stopped. We're going to delete it. Deletion failed because it went back to images. All right, so new NGINX is what we actually want to delete. The other one will get overwritten as we do it. And the thing is, it doesn't actually necessarily reference it by name. It references it by a unique ID. So each build and each time you run a container, it will not necessarily update the running process. So we would have to go over to images. We see dangling image here. We can delete that. We can start this, but we do have to set our optional settings. And we can go to run. Better. So you notice now, instead of showing that, we see this here, where it's a different folder defined. NGINX exited once again, but let's actually take a look where that's defined. And my feeling is we may actually just need to set the permissions appropriately on these particular directories. So let's go ahead and do that. We're just going to set it to be the same. Because we can. Because we know that all of these are related to NGINX, because we're copying them over directly from our build. And I'm not sure about lock, but we're going to do it anyway. To be honest with you, this is the only thing that's actually running in here. So let's do it again, same process. So we're going to stop this out. Go back to our containers. Delete the container, which will then free up the image, so we can delete the image. Then we're going to rebuild. Okay, we see our run commands worked. Let's go back over to Docker. We see our new image. We're going to run it. All right, so right now, it couldn't run the supervisor.d PID file, but it was able to start both NGINX and PHP FPM. So we should have it fully running at this point. So let's go back over to where we can connect to it. So here we had bad gateway. 404 not found. That's something different. Let's see. Welcome to NGINX. Let's do player. HLS, JLS. Let's start our other container for our source, and let's just make sure we haven't broken anything first. So now we have our source running as well. We can go back over here. Just going to refresh the page, and we do see it's running. I'm going to unmute it for a second, and let's take a listen. I don't know if you hear that, but there's a little bit of choppiness in the audio. I'm not sure if that's the source file or this, but it could be related to the fact that we're using incredibly low latency on our actual outgoing stream. And there's high jitter, so usually that's how that manifests. I'm not too concerned about that because I don't think that's related to the HLS server itself, but I did think it's worth bringing up because in watching back yesterday's live stream, I did notice that, and I thought it was worth mentioning here. So you probably hear it better than me right now because I'm just kind of hearing it on a low level on some on my speakers just because I don't have more critical audio listening. But obviously before production, there's going to be some major scrutiny on this to make sure that's what's going into it is what's coming out of it. So we got this going. So let's mute that. We're going to pause it as well. Let's keep going from here. So we've already accomplished the first part. I'm going to do the SSL another time. So just to kind of keep things moving here, but you kind of get the overall idea of what is actually happening. We do want to make sure, though, at some point that we do give it the ability to be able to create its own PID file. And I do want to check that before we close it. So let's see. So we can see our connections to it, everything else like that. And it's cycled out. So whatever. And let's go back over to containers. And that one exited automatically. Perfect. So moving on from here, I wanted to do some modification to the player. Okay, so we've already gone through. We have our dynamic player ready to go. Actually, we didn't get a PHP file to actually run in there. So I do want to check that really quick, because I don't believe we have it set to copy it, which is why it didn't show up. So I just want to double check that and make sure that is in fact the case, and I do believe it is. Okay, so I'm going to add it after this. And actually, he has a flag for it. Let's see. So we actually can put that earlier. So I'm going to copy all of our files here. Right, so backing out from here, we need to copy in our source files from player. Because we see there's no index file here either. So we were working in here. We're going to do index.php. So I'm actually going to just add it to the root, just because I'm going to want to add it to the root here. Right, and that's going straight into the root as well. We're on containers. Let's go ahead and do the same build process. Should be just the addition of that one file, and because we're already setting it as part of the command, we shouldn't have to add any additional commands in order to be able to do that. Perfect. Images, unused, let's launch it. Other options, 1935, 8080. Run, we're just going to give it whatever name it comes up. Still cannot do run supervisor D. Everything else looks like it ran successfully. Let's go back over and look at our actual file. I'm going to delete everything here. And I'm going to try /index.php. Still says not found, so it may not have copied successfully. So where are our actual, where's the root of our PHP? Oh, and that would be in our NGINX file. And I have a feeling we didn't define it. So we should probably do that. So let's go back over here. And we want our config file, nginx.conf. We do have it available that we could just open, but I think this will be just fine. So HTTP, octet stream. So we didn't define root above our index. So it actually doesn't know where to listen. And something else that was also defined within the Docker file that I just want to take a look at was, I do believe it deleted the other stuff that was there. I just want to verify that first. Okay, I do see it made it from scratch, so nothing existed by default. But since we do have one that already exists, let's first build it, see where we get to, and then we can decide from there whether we're going to need to delete it. Just since the builds are so fast at this point, it's easy enough to do. Perfect. And I did want to just look at this again. Something that we can also do is actually go to here and we get a command line. So like if we ls this, we do see index.php, but it looks like there's something else in play that's not serving it. So we need to see what that default is. And actually, in particular, right here where it says etc nginx conf d, we see nothing is there. We see our fastcgi.conf, we see our nginx.conf, we see nginx.conf default. So we can do vi nginx.conf.default. This has the PHP specifications already within it, etc., as well as SSL, because literally this is all you'd have to add. And I say that like it works. So pretty much the generation of the certificates is more, in a way that the browser will trust it, is more difficult than it is to actually add it to NGINX. So I'm not entirely sure where it's being served from. So I do see this, which is the user local NGINX HTML index.php. No such file or directory. But then I do see this, which is the index.php. Interesting. So it's saying this is the index.php. Let's verify that that's index.html. It is. So now we should see that reflected in the logs. So / index.html. And I think part of it is that it's actually not forwarding it correctly. So where are we actually getting this from? So we may be doing a double specification of the location. So let's verify this really quick. And it's saying user local NGINX HTML. Let's actually go there. Ah, I see. So let's get rid of this because it's obviously defined elsewhere. Meow. Nella's here to say hello. We're going to get this to display appropriately. Here we go. User local NGINX HTML. So let's actually update our Docker file to reflect that appropriately. All right, and that makes sense. And we will... I'm not sure if it's remove, if that's actually a thing in Docker. I don't remember off the top of my head. So I'm just going to do run rm user local NGINX HTML index.html. Because we did establish that we do have that. What's the matter? You want to come up here? Look at this cutie cat. You okay? All right, so we got that, so it's going to delete. Is it here? So let's actually go ahead and do the same process. We're going to rebuild it. So I'm going to stop it over here. We're going to go back. Run images, not containers. Right here, we're going to remove this. Now we can go to images, and we can remove this as well. Rebuild. Perfect. Let's rerun. Perfect. Let's go to the web. All right, it's not parsing, but that's okay. That is also fine. So we may need to define that after all. But with the updated path. So we're getting much closer. Because I'm actually noticing that all of this is defined in each individual entry. Let's go here. Okay, let's try that. Same deal. All right. Oh, I didn't turn back on the music. All right, let's go back over here, run it. Let's see what we get. So it's still not interpreting it, and I think that may be related to the root issue. So we may want to define it globally instead of trying to do this. Also, this is the wrong path, so that doesn't help either. Is that what I pasted in here? So we actually want this. And to be honest, I'm just going to put it in both because we're doing overrides anyway, so what's the difference at this point? So let's go ahead and stop this. We'll get rid of that. And this is so much more ergonomic, but this makes me want to just actually do the whole project. I'm probably not going to make everybody suffer through all of this, because I know how tedious and really annoying this is to try and watch unless you're really into programming. So let's just see if we can get the PHP file to load, since that's the whole point of this, but then we're going to call it a day. And I promise we'll get back to some more normal content with the Raspberry Pi or something else like that next week. Unless there's interest. If you actually do like doing, you know, these kinds of videos, things like that with Docker, and we want to do more of these, we can definitely try and come up with hopefully some more instant gratification projects, opposed to it being something where it's long and tedious. Because I tend not to necessarily choose the right thing for this. I haven't come up with any ideas, which is why I haven't done it sooner. Just so happens that I have to do this anyway, so it makes sense to kind of incorporate it, share the wealth in terms of the fun that I'm having. So no joy on that. No joy on that. I am actually going to go into the console here, see if I can move it to another folder, and see if that works. So we do see the index.php. So let's cp index.php into players. And let's try that. It's not the right file. Still forbidden. Let's just do a quick search. What error number was that? I forgot. 403? Yeah. How easy does that look? Let's try it. I don't know if it'll be specific to our thing, but I do know that that was part of it that we added to it, so. And that is our syntax. So let's just comment this out just so we have it for reference. I'm going to put this right below it. Let's just see if that works. So I'll stop this and let's see what we could do. Right, we rebuild. Okay. That was not our issue, so. But let's check. Oh, that doesn't exist anymore. Let's do this. Still comes up with nothing there. Not passing to PHP. So it is running on port 9000 in FPM, which should still be within the container itself. We have the index.php, fastCGI params. I think we have fastCGI enabled. Let's actually just go back and double check that they didn't have an additional file associated with that was causing it to respond differently. Because I didn't see a dot file. And our php.ini file is pretty much defaults. FPM pool, let's just double check this. 9000 FPM status on demand. Let's make sure it doesn't have an address to a folder that it uses, because I think that would probably be an issue since we're not at the default directory. Actually, what did it say? Dev standard error. So it has its server listener here. It has its root. All of this. We did a verbatim copy right here. So it says it's running, but when we actually go in here and we look at it, right, we do see it's just serving it, but not recognizing PHP. So let's actually search that. Configure NGINX server, reload. I don't know that this is going to be... DigitalOcean is actually very trustworthy in terms of their guides, so let's actually just take a quick look. So, version 7, FPM. Right, FPM pool. All of this should already be defined through that file. And let's see. Our temp location. So for us, we are starting this automatically. NGINX. Right, so we have our root here. Our index files defined. We have our try file. This one's doing a much simpler PHP pass. So we can actually comment this out. Let's see. Oh, it's using the socket. But we can just move this down. Because we're not using a socket for this particular thing. And I believe we are using fastCGI params, not fastcgi.conf. Outside of that, I am leaving the rest the same. And then our try file. All right, I'm going to get rid of this because we already have that defined globally. Okay, so let's stop this. Remove it. Build it. All right, we see how much is cached, so it's actually really not bad. And I don't know if I said this yesterday either. On the Docker Hub website, if you pay for the for one of their subscriptions, what you can do is you can actually link your GitHub to have them build it for you and then post it. And that's my usual workflow, which is why this is so unusual, because I usually don't use Docker Desktop because I have a couple of Docker servers that I dedicate to the purpose of actually running Docker containers. So for me, I usually don't run them locally. I create the services and then run them on servers, not necessarily using Kubernetes or any of the other functions for swarming containers like that. They're usually purpose-built for performing a particular task. So just for background on where I'm coming from this. So, we all learn together, but there's nothing wrong with trying to expand your horizons a little bit. And I'm trying to think of also the last time I implemented a PHP 7 on NGINX. But it's definitely related to the server tag here. Right, because we have our listen, we have our root, we have our index definition. Then we have all of our HLS definitions, our dash. URLs for stat. And then the stuff that we added, which is slash. So we reverted back to the original /index.php. Q equals URI. We have the redirection. We added the simplified FPM. Let's see. Because this has some specific things in terms of document root. So I do want to see if I can find that elsewhere in this document. And it does not appear to be specified. Let's go back over to the other Docker file and see if it's actually specified there. It is not. Because we have root, but we don't have document root specified. And I believe it is translated. We also have server name. So let's actually match some of those. Let's see. Again, this is hunting for a solution, but this is definitely programming right here. Send file off. Let's just match it, because I don't believe it's going to be an issue for the other side of it. Also, I do not believe that these are necessarily the causes, but I do like to just match apples to apples when I can. Right, so under the server definition, we're doing send file off. Then we have our root definition, our index definition. We don't have location at the top, though, to be honest with you, it doesn't really matter. But I'm going to put it there anyway, because it also does make sense. We're going to get rid of this since this came from somewhere random. We are going to save that. Let me make sure that we don't have something else in this repository that we're missing, because we do have a source file here, but it's just those two files, right? Index.php and test. Okay, just wanted to make sure. Does this have a file here? Okay, just want to make sure. So there's two fast CGI files here. So we have document root. Right, that's CGI. So that is fine. And let's do params. I'm curious if we have to enable CGI. I'm not sure that that's the case, but let's just take a look at NGINX .conf.default. Because it does have the example of using PHP on this as well. Right, so we have our location. So in this case, it's proxy the PHP scripts to Apache. Isn't that funny? That's interesting. But then pass the PHP scripts to FastCGI server listening on 9000. And this has it a little bit different. Just for fun, I'm going to try this, because it could be a version difference thing. that I think would be very interesting. It's very simple, but sometimes that's how it goes. Right, so this is pretty much everything. We're just going to leave it as it is. Whoops. Some Vim fun right there. Let's see. So let's delete this. Images, we'll delete this as well. Let's build. Right, should have stayed on images. We'll launch. Perfect. Survey says it's not taking the index either, though, which makes me think something else is going on here. I'm just going to scrutinize the actual entries that they have for the HLS stuff. Because there is another option, right? And it's just really annoying, and it invalidates everything that we just did here. But I could also start another container that just has the web server and PHP built on it. Go with the default for this particular package, so we don't do anything custom in terms of this. Just let it pass the HLS stream, and then from there, modify our player on the other web server, since technically speaking, it's all referring to external packages anyway. And then I can use Apache, I can use whatever I want. I would map it to a different port and send clients there, and then that would go pretty much to the other port, which would just, it already has the cross-domain signature. Maybe I should draw it. Because if we're gonna end it like this, all right. And even I could draw it on the screen. So, right, so let's say we have our client, and I'm going to try and speak into the mic as I do this. So I guess it doesn't really matter what screen I'm on. Whoops. Right, so I'll just open up a blank page. So we have our happy user right here. Okay, and our happy user goes into our first container. All right, and this supports PHP. Then that will serve our player. And that will point to our NGINX HLS stream. right? And then we have whatever our source is. Going into there. And that goes to the player. I have more colors, right? So the request goes like this. And then the audio goes like this. So I think that's what I'm going to do. All right. And that the idea behind this is that then this is, well, this is native, right? And this is native. And that way I don't have to do the modifications. The only thing I need to do is actually take the content and put it on the PHP as an app. So everything becomes simpler. I just have to define whatever my ports are. All of the containers stay the same. We're not doing a weird, combined container between them. So they're all staying as individual containers. And I think that that's probably going to be the best thing, just because it's a lot of... So here's kind of how we bit off more than we can chew. And by we, I mean me, but, take it with a grain of salt. This is part of the development process, is sometimes we got to go through it because I'm not necessarily going into this knowing what the capabilities of particular things are. This is that development process to understand what the needs analysis is. I wouldn't go to production with this level of type of, lack of understanding. But the idea is that we try things and find out exactly what the options are, how things are going to perform, which is why we're doing it on a local environment. So as part of this, coming up with what those optimizations are to be able to say, that the PHP package can be used on its own. The NGINX HLS is working just fine on its own. And then it's also nice if somebody else is still maintaining it and it's also used in other environments, to be able to have that precedent to say that this is going to be something that's stable. I may still want to download a copy of it just in case he decides to delete it one day. But realistically, and also maybe try updating some of the packages, but that's, again, another thing. But at the end of the day, I think it's a lot better in terms of now we just worry about making it look the way that we want. Because when we look at the index.php file that we had before, everything that was custom was done through CDN up here in terms of what makes it any different than any other, right here, makes it any different from any other file, and specifically, like, since we're pulling out the Telestrator here. So these links right here are what's actually, doing all of the heavy lifting. So beyond that, there's one call down here, to create the video file and the script, right? So this is the actual player, right? And this is the script that makes that player do things. So at the end of the day, it makes sense to just move the PHP file somewhere else, have it go across domains, which will make it so that way we can get everything up and running and potentially integrate it with a larger site. Like, something else that I need to port over is some existing code that I have for the previous HTML5 only player using IceCast. There's a trouble reporting system, so that way clients and users and things like that. So specifically, this is for a web stream for a nonprofit radio station that I do some volunteer work for. So when they have users listening, they want to be able to file a ticket and then somebody can reach out to them, or because it's not a commercial station or anything else like that, they may not realize that there's a problem with the web stream. So having some mechanism so users can be able to self-report any issues makes it a lot easier. So that's part of what has to be integrated. That includes email integration, things like that. So at least having that starting point to where there's more of a default package also helps keep containers from getting bloated, because that was kind of getting to that point where it's turning into a full VM, and that's not really the intent behind Docker. So I would say it's a good development session. It was 2 hours in. Again, it's not one of those things where you get the gratification, but it is something where I needed to do that work, and hopefully you appreciated, coming along for the ride. So I may not do any more videos about this just because I kind of got the plan together, just so I can kind of expedite working on it. And from there, I think it's going to make it a lot easier to try and make everything ultimately work. So, it's one thing at a time. But if you are interested in this type of thing, please let me know and we'll do more of it. And if I can come up with some more projects and things like that are a little more basic to kind of maybe get our feet wet and go into more of the fundamentals, I think that might be the way to go. So hopefully you also don't mind me rambling on as we go through all of this in terms of what my inner thought process is either. So, well, that's going to do it for today. So thanks for watching. If you've been watching the stream this long, I definitely appreciate it. And if you've been watching the video this long, I appreciate it too. And if you know anybody who would like, this kind of content or any of the other content that I produce, be sure to share it with them. I would appreciate it, and I hope they would appreciate it too. If you like the video, hit the like button. I definitely appreciate your likes. I do this mainly for the subs and likes. And, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. It helps me a lot. It helps me out a lot with the YouTube algorithm. And then hit that notification bell. That way the next time we're getting extended. So until then, take care.